Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Holden Conversations. I thought I was cool covering the NBA draft, being 21 and all. And then I realized one, there are people younger than me covering the NBA draft last week. And two, I met some of them, including Melisa Guzeloglu, that took 20 times of practice, who covered the Arizona Wildcats draft, including Carter Bryant, who was selected to the San Antonio Spurs. Chris Carrino, who goes to Fordham University, who covered all things New York sports for the draft for WFUV, Fordham's radio station. And Matt Guzman, who is currently off camera, a little bit of technical difficulties, some traffic delays and stuff like that, but is here with us audio side for right now, who goes to Missouri University, who covered all things San Antonio Spurs. Thank you guys all for joining me today. And my first question for you guys, and any of you guys answer first. All you guys get your mute off. This is a free flowing space. Initial nerves on day one going into this were
I didn't think it was a nervous feeling. I was more excited. I always hear players talking about how, like, oh, am I scared to go into this game? Am I nervous? No, I'm excited. It was an opportunity to get to do something new and something to practice, that because I want to do it over and over again. So I don't know. It was just a privilege in itself.
Yeah, I can relate to the from the reps perspective, especially day two. I was there a lot with a lot of the second round guys. It was just good to kind of ask questions and kind of, break that barrier of nervousness or whatever that is. Even if you're not maybe using it all for content. Also, I appreciate holding the non-mute comment because I am in the Bronx with a bunch of motorcycles constantly, and I don't like to interrupt, but
yeah.
I appreciate that. Also, two people in this roundtable, they could lay claim to Carter Bryant and I'm pretty envious. I'm infinitely envious of that. I love his game. But anyway,
Yeah.
it was fantastic to cover the game, especially me. I'm a little more wider with kind of our coverage. I'm kind of just getting coverage when I can get it, and it's a little less specific. So that kind of helps me from a perspective of just kind of being able to experience everything. But it also, from a New York perspective, as you said, a lot of Brooklyn net coverage, a lot of Knicks coverage. Not a lot of Knicks coverage, obviously, in this draft, just because they weren't as active. But the Nets were maybe the most active, so there was definitely a lot of content there. And in Barclays Center, a place where I've been, a lot of times in my life, it was really cool. It's an awesome scene. I've been going for almost a decade, so it was very cool to be there in a
What's funny to
professional
you,
facet.
I like what you said, Chris. Not much Knicks, but I mean, the Nets more than made up for it. I
Yeah.
was curious because, I thought two was, a little bit of a hassle trying to deal with and remember and figure out who was going where. How did you deal with five first round picks?
It was interesting for sure. I think kind of going into the draft class and knowing it was going to be active from 8 months ago was definitely helpful. Guys like Nolan Traore were guys I've been watching for a very long time. I kind of had my eye on. Obviously Jaeger Demon as well, another guy that he was top four projected in the early stages of the college basketball season. So another guy I had my eye on. I just by chance am a massive UNC basketball fan, so very comfortable with Drake Powell. Ben Seraph is one guy I wasn't the most comfortable with, a guy kind of to your point that I had to, do my research on and remember. But he has an interesting story in himself coming from Israel and things of that nature. And, Danny Wolf, of course, a story in himself as well. I got to see him play a game here in New Jersey against Ace Bailey and Rutgers, and he was fantastic, and his Wolverines won. So I think I kind of have weird personal attachments to the five guys. I think if it was a more miscellaneous group of five, I would, be in a little more trouble. But the fact that it was guys I kind of had connections to and I was sort of following on any sort of level, it definitely helped a lot. And honestly, kind of made me feel better about the Nets' choices as well, because I felt that they were the right choices in a lot of those situations.
Yeah, for sure. I
Matt,
get that.
anything like specifically for you, like going in? Like for me, I listened to the Rocky music before the Tuesday pre-draft, trying to hype myself up. Was there any like level of like mentality or mindset you tried to carry yourself? I mean, you were coming from Texas all the way to New York City. You were making the true trek. All I had to, I'm already in Manhattan.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I'm kind of with Melissa. I was really excited more than nervous heading into the actual event itself, but making the trek from Texas, the nerves for me was just making sure I got to Barclays in one piece on
Yeah.
time. It was the first time I'd ever navigated New York City, so it was a little bit different.
Did everyone drive?
Overall, I mean, it was great. Did what?
I took the train.
I took the train. I'm in New York City.
Well,
Got
the
it.
first day I took the train for like media availability, and then the second day of the draft, I was wearing a white dress, so I didn't take the train.
That's
Probably smart. Probably
Yeah.
smart.
Valid. Yeah.
smart thing.
Guz and Guzman, you drive, right?
So I flew into New York, but I took the subways.
Got it.
Um,
So everyone was
because
public transport. I'm the only one who parked.
that's crazy.
Well, the
Lucky.
Where are
first,
you
yeah.
parking?
The lot next to they have the car elevator where it's like the event where all the
Oh
players are
yeah,
going
yeah,
in, and they
yeah.
have the lot right next to it. I'll park there. There is street parking, but it is very difficult.
It was there like kind of like a certain moment during the draft for any of you guys where you were like, wow, like I can't believe I did this? Like there were a lot of players who were kind of like, oh my God, like this is crazy that this is happening. Was there ever a moment for any of you guys where you realized like I'm here, like I'm doing this kind of?
Yeah, I have one. I'll just because one jumps into mind really quickly. I was on the phone with my dad walking like back like toward because it was kind of a trek to get from where our media room was to where they would take us where the stairs were. You kind of had to go around the entire downstairs portion. And I was walking through one of those hallways and I just look up on the phone as I'm up and as close as this water bottle is to me, Cooper Flag is walking past me with like two people, and I was just like, oh, like this is. It kind of made me, recontextualize. Like it made it feel very real in a real way. And then from there, it felt amazing. It was very cool.
Matt,
Also,
that
it's weird because we're the same age as these guys. Like it's very strange. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Matt,
that's
that
always
Yeah.
been the weird thing about being so young is that
Yeah,
like the people we're talking to are used to talking to 30, 40, 50 year olds.
yeah,
So I almost like to say it gives us a little bit of an advantage because they get to feel a little bit better about talking to somebody their own age.
yeah.
I can't imagine
Definitely.
I can imagine that's a little weird for them to always be dealing with 40 and 50 year olds, every single
100%.
day.
There has to be a level of relatability there from a kid there. I mean, it's the people they're interacting with on a daily basis. So it has to be even just how we're kind of interacting with social media and we're seeing similar things and things like that.
Yeah, I know from covering Carter like his whole time at Arizona and being a student at the U of A, coming to Brooklyn and like seeing him just up getting drafted and like talking to us during media availability, I was like, wow, like this is really happening. Like he's here, I'm here. Let's enjoy this moment and like let's keep going.
Yeah.
Um,
Melissa, did he recognize you when you asked your question?
yeah, during the first day on the Tuesday where we went to talk to the prospects, he
Right.
came in and he was so happy to see like Chris, which is the Arizona men's basketball Instagram admin, I believe, and like me, we were like familiar faces. And he came in and he
Yeah.
shook my hand. He was like, "It's nice to see you," and he shook Chris's hand and he was like, "It's nice to see you." And it was just really nice. Like it
Very
was like,
cool.
yeah, like I did make my ways here to do all this, so it's glad that they recognize us.
kind of
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's
kind of build
happening.
on that too. Do you think I think as we all know, relatability is very important in getting good sound bites. It's not just about getting sound bites, but getting good sound bites so people feel more comfortable, like they're talking to someone who really just wants to know what they're saying, and they're not doing it for a deadline or for clicks or anything like that. Do you guys think uh, our age kind of helped with the relatability to the players being drafted and the conversations that we all kind of had? Like I got two one-on-one sit downs, and I think the fact that even though I'm like a foot shorter than both people I interviewed, I think that how young I was and just understanding, having a better understanding of what they went through can help me help them per se. You guys feel that in any way?
I do. I feel that in almost a different perspective. I feel it like prior to this, I always kind of felt almost like a kid in these environments, or even covering in high school or covering early in college. I felt very much like below these guys, not even on like a hierarchy level, but just an age level, just feeling like almost like a kid. But now I go to these things, and the players are kids too, so it does add a level of comfortability from my perspective kind of doing this. And I'm sure it does for them too.
Matt, what do you think?
I honestly think it helps. It's less about the soundbite and more so it helps us tell their story
Mhm.
because, you know, I remember maybe, I guess it was 2 summers ago now when Victor was first drafted. Um, they gave him a first look in the Spurs jersey, let him take some shots it wasn't the facility at that time, it was the actual arena, Frost Bank. And he missed like 8 shots in a row. It was bad. Like I knew he was going to
I
get
remember
flamed on
that. I
Twitter. I
remember that.
remember, yeah, and everybody was like, man, he's a bust. Like, he can only shoot bricks. Like, why do we get this dude? And, I remember when I started writing articles about him, when he got up on the press conference on the podium, he talked about his mom. He talked about his brother. His whole family made the trip. And I mean, he was 20. Oscar is a couple years younger. He's like 18 now. And
That's
his
his
sister
brother.
is maybe 1 year younger. Yeah, Oscar's his brother. Um, and so it helped me to kind of understand him a little bit more, because when you really think about it, all these prospects, when talking about Cooper earlier, the amount of pressure that they're under to show up to a franchise and immediately impact winning is crazy. And for a second, you can see the joy and everything that comes with being drafted. But then I think us being young, you kind of understand, like, we can only try to imagine ourselves in that position. And I think it helps us to kind of gain perspective when we're thinking about it. um, and we start approaching the way we're going to talk about them in print or, on a podcast or whatever. And I think it helps a lot.
But
A
as
thousand
Mel
percent.
but as Melissa was kind of saying, having those connections where a lot of national media isn't covering a player game by game, and if you're, in college and you're covering student media for your school, you kind of get to build that rapport on top of the fact that you're someone close to their age. And both Carter Bryant and Melissa are both going through a journey right now. And presumably both of them are at the start. So it's like we're all in this together. If you're talking to a 47-year-old journalist, if a 18-year-old talking to a 47-year-old journalist, the rapport and the understanding of why both people are there is just like a different connotation, right? You guys agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say that being young also helps because, in our 20s, we're always told to make as many mistakes as we can, ask the questions now. So it makes me so comfortable to know that like we're going in it, not being naive in a sense, but we kind of have a clean palette, of where to go off of and how we could build our reputation and who we could be and who we can make connections with. So it's an advantage all in all in itself.
I posted on,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, what were you
No,
saying?
yeah, I was gonna double back on what you said, Holden, kind of that like in it together sort of vibe. A story kind of jumps to my mind, but my dad works for the Nets as well. He's worked for a long time, and when he got the job, it was 2002 full time. He got the job, and him and Jason Kidd are the same age, and they get there within days of each other. They're hired, or obviously Jason's traded, but they are brought together, and they had a conversation on his press conference day, kind of laughing about how we're in this together. We're both starting this together, and then now all this time later they went through all this basketball together and things like that. I think if you didn't have that sort of in it together mindset, you can't create that sort of comfortability because, like you said, it's kind of a them and us sort of thing when it's maybe there's a really big age gap, or it's just from a mentality perspective, it's not even an age thing. It could just
We're
be a
up
kind
and
of
coming like them.
what?
We're up and coming like them. Like
Exactly. That's
we're
yes.
we're growing. I was
And I had a question for Matt and Melissa, kind of off that point. You guys were going into the draft, and to you extent, holding to you for a certain extent too, because you had only a couple guys really as options. But you guys kind of went to the draft knowing who you were going to cover. Matt, I mean, if it wasn't Dylan Harper, it would have shook the basketball world. And Melissa, obviously, you were covering Carter, who you'd been covering for a lot of the year. What was that like? Obviously, mine was more of a general kind of coverage, so I don't really know what it was like to know who I was covering going, being able to prep for that for the week prior. Like, were you guys doing research? What was that sort of process like?
It's funny you mentioned that, Chris, because, like, I think all of us were same feeling with Victor. I hate to bring him up again, right? But two out of 3 years in a row now, we've kind of known exactly what was going to happen, and you're just waiting to hear the official words from Adam Silver,
Yeah.
so you can kind of put it to rest and start focusing on, okay, this guy is a Spur now I can cover him or whatever.
Yeah.
The coolest thing for me was kind of getting to, like, we had that day on Tuesday where we could speak to everybody, and at the draft combine, he already knew how the lottery had shook out and then what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, you kind of saw this progression of, at the combine, he's very open ended about, you don't know where I could go. I have no idea what's next for me. All I know is I'm going to do this and do that, try to do what I can to be my best or whatever. Just very open ended, vague answers. And then you get to Tuesday, the day before the draft, and all of a sudden you got three San Antonio reporters there, and all of them are asking if Dylan's had a breakfast taco. They're asking if he's talked to Victor. They're
That's
asking
funny.
what number he wants to wear with the Spurs.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see him start to break the wall a little bit. And he's like, if it does work out that way, then yes, I think I'd like number two, or I have had a breakfast taco kind of thing. And so the cool thing was just watching it unfold because then
Seeing those
I got
walls break down, it's pretty cool.
absolutely. And so the first, when he got drafted, I got the first question, and I was like, well, look, for weeks now you've said it's not set in stone, and now it is. So how do you feel? And
That's
you
cool.
saw that whole wall come down, and so I enjoyed that process of knowing who I was going to cover because you got to build more of a relationship. Whereas if you go into the draft not knowing who your team's going to select, you've got 24 prospects that any of them could be the dude that you're going to cover for the next season.
Yeah.
And maybe like I didn't talk to Carter on Tuesday because I didn't think he was going to fall to 14.
Mm.
And so I kind of had to do a backlog of research. I talked to six
Unbelievable that he
other
fell to
dudes.
14, by the way. Unbelievable.
It
You
was kind
guys
of
should have
crazy.
read you guys should have read the Daily Wildcat mock draft. We had him at number 14, so maybe you would have gotten a sense of it.
Wow.
Wow, touche.
That's
Really?
crazy. You called your shot.
I was
I
yelling in the media room for the Nets to trade up to 12 to get him. I saw him open at 12. I'm like, what are they doing?
I mean, I was hoping he would go higher even, but it just happened like that. But this was literally, I want to show you, like, since I knew I was covering Carter, this was like my prep for everything, just like all the questions I wanted to ask him, like, just, his height, like, what school he goes to, like, as if I don't know. And I just couldn't wait. It was it gave me that sense of relief where it was like, okay, I know what to do. I know my job for my publication, and I'm going to get what I need to get. But then also, I get to explore the rest of these prospects and get to build on these new questions and like connections to make in the future. And I don't know. And then I was also there for Caleb Love, who signed a two-way contract with the Blazers, with who. And and
I'm a Tar Heel. I'm a Tar Heel, Melissa. Come on now.
oh,
Come on now.
okay. I mean, no, respect. Like, good for like I love
Team
that.
Caleb Love forever.
Yes, no, I mean you did, yeah, yeah. So he was great. He was great there. I mean, leading them to a championship game. Love it.
He ended Coach Calipari. Or not Calipari, Coach Krzyzewski. That happened.
Yeah, that did happen.
That's just
That
the
did
facts
happen.
of the situation.
Yeah, and I don't think that being a fifth year player is as terrible as everyone says. Maybe that's a hot take,
No.
but
Yeah.
yeah. So he
Were
wasn't.
you in the
I
gym for the half quarter, by the way? I have to ask.
the ha against what was it, Iowa?
I don't even remember. I watched it live, and
I think it was, yeah, I was there for a buzzer beater. Yeah. And then the final seconds, I think I was with my assistant editor and we're like recording and we're both like jumping up and down like after like it happened and we were so hyped. But yeah, then I got intel that he wasn't going to be in Brooklyn, and that he was having like a party in Tucson and he was going in the second round, but then he did go undrafted. It just gave me a sense of relief and gave me like that backpedal to be like, okay, what should I have prepared?
Do you think there was like, because you were there for basically just Carter, was there like a level of like, I have to be perfect because you have
Um,
all these details that are accessible to you that weren't necessarily accessible to someone who was covering like a team with like the 17th pick per se? Did you feel like a level of perfection that was required? Because I saw you had a really nice long quote at the end of your story. Like it was seemed like you had like a plan going into it.
Yeah, I felt really confident. I feel I'm so confident in my writing, and writers are never going to be satisfied with what they do. Like, let's just let that be known. We're perfectionists in our own ways.
Facts.
So we're always going to want to make some edits and changes, but we're going to have to be okay with our art at the end of the day. It was just something I was proud of. I never thought I needed to be perfect. I just knew I wanted to learn, like be a sponge, like Cooper is saying, like all of the prospects say when they come into the league, they say be a sponge. And that's our job as well as journalists. We're here just as much as like why they're here, because we worked.
Yeah, and I think like I was talking to Kaman Maluak after you got drafted, and he was talking about delusion that comes in, about how he started playing basketball when he was a teenager, and he's 18 years old and just got drafted to the NBA as a lottery pick. A lot of delusion came into his journey and how he's gotten to where he is. How have you guys kind of treated like your progressions? Because I feel like covering the draft for anyone is a big step, and we're all 20, 21 years old. Tell me if I'm wrong. Like, how are you guys trying to treat things step by step, but also understanding like, hey, like, I just did something really cool.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's, interesting. I love that story you just told. I can't believe that's unbelievable that he started playing basketball as a teenager and he's in the NBA now.
Yeah.
Like I don't like, you know what I mean? Like that's so wild. But I think kind of from my perspective, I grew up with a lot of these sort of events, I mean, not to say that, it made me comfortable at all. I'm very jarred in a lot of these settings, but I've kind of been seeing a lot of these things, from a young age. I jumped in very early as well. Digital network at my high school was pretty in depth when it came to broadcasting and things like that. I didn't get to do as much reporting there. But then as soon as I got to Fordham, the opportunities here are, I think, second to none in the rest of the country. And I think that the amount of reps I got kind of leading up to this stuff, it helps so much, especially because they put us in such unique situations and at such unique events like this one and the Heisman, and we have Baseball Hall of Fame coming up at the end of the month. So I think a lot of those settings, these kind of things, these reps they are what help for the future events.
Yeah, I think that it also opens new doors too. Like I was
Yeah.
seeing that we even have the opportunity to go to the summer league games if we want to, like where Matt is right now. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity. I don't know. Matt, you say something.
No, I think you nailed it. It's one of those things where I think there's a lot of times where I kind of step back and it's not like you were mentioning earlier, Holden. It's not like a I'm here, I'm doing this. It's more like I get this opportunity and I get a chance to be in the room with these players, with these other people that I've started to make these connections with the Spurs beat. And I think when I first covered a game, I was 18 and I walked in scared as hell about, is Greg Popovich going to eat me alive? Are these reporters going to like put me in a
That's an
locker?
intimidating
Like
environment out of,
it,
it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
oh,
not,
I
it
can relate with Jim
was.
Boeheim freshman year.
I mean, that's
that's,
how it goes, right?
that's
And,
of
and
the
so,
same cloth for the record. That's of the same cloth.
sure, absolutely. It's just one of those things where, you don't really know how it's going to go. And it's been cool to see it progress and to get to do all these different things and just kind of it makes me very grateful to be in the position I am that we are. But at the same time, it's one of those things where kind of got at some point you also have to be like, we worked for it
Yeah.
and that's what makes it rewarding.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
work and the love you have for it. Like we all know how much we love it. So
Right.
we're there, like he said, we're given this opportunity. I get to go cover a game, not I have to go cover a game. And I think when you get to go cover a game, you can make the most of that sort of opportunity in comparison to someone who's kind of just seeing it as a job.
I spoke to someone a few episodes ago. Her name's Isabella Rivera. She covered the national championship for the Florida Gators. She's a UF alum, and she was talking about a lot of her friends think like, oh, like it's a free ticket. It's not a free ticket to go cover things, but it's a free ticket in that sense. If you love doing what you're doing, you get to go do it. And I want to kind of talk about that in a second. I want to start with Matt with this. You had to do a lot of juggling because you're the site manager of Spurs on SI, but also, like all of us, you're a college student and you're going to cover the NBA draft. That's surreal. Starting with you, Matt, how did you juggle the part where it's like I have a job to do, but also basking in that moment, the experience that, it's a one of a kind one?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's helped that I've had multiple experiences covering games and covering players because, that initial like the starstruck that you feel when you see the player for the first time or you see a star player, it's gone away at this point. I've been able to kind of compartmentalize it to it's like, I have this job to do, but then also, you build the connections because they're just people at the end of the day. They're really good basketball players and they're really, they're borderline celebrities, especially at this.
Getting normalized to Victor Wembanyama is hilarious, by the way.
It, it's
Like
it's
an alien walking in the room and you're like, oh, Victor's here.
It's so funny. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that was one that took the longest out of all of them.
I'm sure.
The one that still gets me is LeBron. We were walking in the tunnel because they come for whatever reason. 2 of the last 3 years, they've played back-to-back games in San Antonio at some point on the schedule, and so he's been here for days on end. And so one of the times I was walking, we brushed shoulders, and he didn't. You can't talk to the dude before pregame, like he doesn't break. He doesn't break character, I guess is the best way to put it.
That's a good way of putting it.
He's completely locked in. And so like you'd be like, "What's up, Braun?" And he wouldn't say anything. He won't even look at you. So we brush shoulders and he just moves past and I'm like, and I'm sitting here like I just touched LeBron James and he just walks by like it's nothing. It's one of those things where you kind of put the two and two separate, this job that we have to do, but also it's like this is such a cool moment. And so what helped me hold and answer your question was Friday, Saturday, Sunday was the time I took off work after I was done with the draft just to see New York City. And I went back to Brooklyn to see Barclays from like, not having to walk in immediately to go get my credential or whatever. So that was kind of what helped me. But I think the previous experience, having a chance to have done this before kind of helped a little bit with that balancing act.
I was gonna say a lot of it's together, Holden. I feel like a lot of the stuff that you're getting for your job or you're getting to cover or is a part of what you're doing there professionally. I feel like is a fan sort of perspective. I'm interning for Yes Network this summer, a lot of game day stuff for Yankees. Like it is a lot of intern sort of things like carrying water cases and things like that. But then at the end of the day, I'm watching the Yankees. And that I prefer that to maybe other jobs I've had in the past in other jobs. So I think that kind of perspective is helpful as well. I think if I always worked in sports media my whole life, I would have less of a way to kind of really cherish it and really but now that I've done a lot of the whether it's the food industry or whether it's the guest services industry, I think a lot of those jobs by comparison with the stuff we're doing, it makes it feel like we're just there as a fan and we should be paying to be there. I feel that a lot when we're covering the stuff that like I should be the one who's paying to be here. It's insane I'm getting paid to be here.
Yeah, it's more of a thing too, where it's like, I know as a student, I was taking summer classes. I still am the same time as I'm covering this.
Me too. Yeah.
So,
I don't
right.
know.
But that's the great part about it, like how lucky are we to be tired to get to do all this, or like quote unquote tired to be just working and like continuing to get better at our young age. And I just want to touch on like what Matt said about like, the starstruck thing and whatever, and like LeBron,
Yeah.
because as sports editor of my newspaper at my campus, Bryce is coming next year, Bryce James. And so I imagine that his father will be here for a game, I don't know. So that'll be something that the camp
Definitely.
has to get used to and that the room has to get used to. Like I may be okay and used to being like one of 5 reporters in the room. Now I may be, there may be like one of 20. So yeah.
That's yeah, that's even different because Bryce isn't necessarily even this highly touted prospect, but he has almost like a highly touted entourage, which is
Well,
very
it's just his
it's a
last name is
weird.
James. His last name is James.
Right,
I
right.
think it's important to kind of just, and I think, I've talked to enough professional athletes where I feel like I'm starting to get better at this and just a lot of major figures. You have to acknowledge that, look, I'm going to be a little nervous to start. I'm human. And then you start to realize the more you do this, and Matt, I know you especially because you've done a lot of one-on-ones with NBA players. You start to realize these guys are just people, and it makes your conversations richer
Yeah.
and know what to do even more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been my thing from day one is, athletes are people too. It's like a little phrase that I have in my bio everywhere. Like it's been a huge part of what drives my storytelling is when you realize that these people are the same as we are. They're just really good at basketball, and that's what separates them, and they're like we talked
They
about
got a few
earlier. I
M's
mean,
to their name as well.
well, yeah, they're really good at basketball
Ah,
and they get paid handsomely to be good
ah.
at basketball. But at the end of the day, like especially the dudes at the draft, they're 18, 19, 20. They're just trying to figure this out on their own. And I don't know how many of you guys actually went to the little panel on Tuesday with Bobby and Jay. I think something they mentioned, they were like, well, Ace Bailey, they're like, why is he not working out for the 76ers? Or why was he doing this? He's a 19-year-old kid trying to take advice from this agent he hired, and it didn't work out. But at the end of the day, this is his time, same as us, to make those mistakes, to ask those questions and figure out what you can and can't do. But yeah, I mean, once you kind of realize that, even LeBron James is just a person. He's just a dad. And I'm a little jealous, Melissa, because when he's at Arizona next year, he's not going to be in lock-in mode. You might actually get a chance to talk to him or see
Sure.
him.
Maybe. I remember I got to say hi to Savannah James once.
That's awesome.
Ronnie came for USC. And the panel you were speaking about with Jay Billis, Bobby Marks, and John Fanta, that's where I met Holden. Holden turned around. It was our meeting,
Mm.
and he was like, "What's your name?" And I was like, "I'm Melissa." And we were just like talking about how we worked for our like schools and stuff. It was really nice. We should have met you there.
I
Yeah.
was on the left side.
It-
I'd gravitate toward the left aisle and any kind of press conference, anything like that. So
Why? I've never heard that.
yeah,
I
it's
don't
a
know. I just started sitting there like maybe midway last season, and I just haven't stopped. So now it's my spot.
Does it ever
Even in
depend,
scrums, always be on the left side.
does it ever depend on how much you know about said topic? Because when I'm 100% sure, I'm closer to the front. When I'm like, I'm closer to the back. What about
that's
you?
I
funny.
I I mean, in the Spurs media room, there's 3 rows of chairs on each side. I tend to sit in the second row because the longtime beat reporters who've been there for 40 years get the first row. But no, not for the panel. I just picked a spot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
yeah,
think, oh, sorry. Also, as a woman, like, and like, sometimes it's hard to, there are a lot of hands in the air, so I've been to games and coverage where I'm raising my hand and I know people see me and they won't pick me for a question.
Yep.
So I sit in the front. Don't be scared to sit in the front. We're allowed to take up space, like as much as anyone else. I mean, we have to earn it, but we are.
And
Sure. I was gonna
also,
say all these media institutions are different. Like the Spurs are maybe more of an institution, more of a long term. Like I know from my perspective with the Nets, like Nets Daily takes up most of the front row and most of the press
Yeah.
conferences. You know what I mean? So it's a bit of a different sort of vibe. I know a lot of the Spurs sort of aesthetic or aura is translated to Brooklyn with Sean Marks. Sean Marks took a lot of that culture to Brooklyn. I see a lot of similarities, but I do know it's just different in San Antonio. Everything's different in San Antonio. It feels like in a good way,
Yeah.
for sure. Like
Yep.
how
In a good
everything's
way.
different when I go to Yankee Stadium. It's just different than every other park in the MLB. It's just not the same.
but Melissa, as you were saying, they want you got a credential, you got it approved. People want you there. So yeah, you got to take up your space, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you go sit in the back. You do what you want to do because you're given this opportunity more than anything. You're given
Well,
access.
we have a job to do. I need to get my quote. I need to write my article.
And
Yeah,
So,
you're credentialed like everyone else is credentialed. Like that's a
ex-
big thing too. That's how you have to gain comfortability with this stuff. Like if you're in a room at one of these places, it's because you did something to get into that room. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not you weren't just put in that room. You weren't just given that opportunity.
Melissa, I
yeah.
was telling you, like, of course they do credential backgrounds on us. I think we were talking.
Yeah.
Like, of
I
course
got
they have
worried.
to know
Like,
you're qualified.
because when I got the email that was like approved NBA credential like draft, I was like, oh my, well, first of all, I started bawling my eyes out. And then I was like,
I had a
yeah,
similar reaction, not crying, but like I understand what you mean.
yeah, I just, well, it wasn't that I felt small. My campus newspaper is not small. I'm Mark Stein. When I met him at one of the panels, he told me, he was like, no, like that's one of the bigger papers. And I was like, oh, okay, like I guess people are watching us. And you just have to be comfortable and confident in everything that we do. And I guess I was just thinking that there's so many media outlets. I was scared of not getting picked, but I was like, no, there's a chance because I got the application. So.
But I mean, it was surreal. I was with my grandparents when I found out, and I was like, I'm sorry, but like I'm overfilled with joy right now. Like that's an awesome feeling.
Yeah,
I mean,
everything happens for a reason.
and I guess the reason I enjoyed it even more, I had applied for the combine because I go like you were saying earlier, Missouri, and it's a 5 hour, 5 to 6 hour drive to Chicago. So I was going to go to the combine, and check it out, and then they denied me, and I was like, okay. I was really upset, but then I realized that they let 14 total into the lottery room. So I was like, okay, there's no chance I was going to get that. But I thought maybe I had a chance at the combine, and they ended up saying no. It seems to be a space issue. So I wasn't sure if I was going to get the draft.
And it makes you grateful when you do get them because
One
Absolutely.
day,
it's not a like
soon.
Melissa. I know Melissa was making jokes like, do they make background checks? Like you would laugh at how like
Yeah,
yeah
Chris, you would know. Your dad is the voice of the Nets. Like you,
yes, and but also I'm very because I'm kind of I work hand in hand with who gets our credentials here. We have a really great team who like helps us with our credentials. They can pretty much get any credential, but I know that like they'll be like, oh, we're getting one instead of two this time, and it's because people like Melissa are there, or people that wouldn't normally. It's not normal local, and they have to make room. And if you're not worthy of being there, why would they give up somebody else's seat? You know what I mean?
especially
Yeah, I
after.
remember
Sorry, you go.
they asked for like links, I think for like 3 to 5 articles and
Oh
whatever. I
wow.
put down 5. I was like,
Oh
I was
wow.
like, here, TJ McConnell, Carter Bryant, Caleb Blunt, like everything. And I was just like, no, like my paper cares about basketball and we care about Carter. And I wanted to be able to support him. I'm from Brooklyn. So it was like I can't watch the draft for the last 10 years of my life and not try and go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
But more than anything, you have unique access and perspective on Carter Bryant that
Yeah,
a
very.
national publication isn't going to have.
Yeah, totally. And especially since he's 18, I'm 21. And like you said, it's that like relatability that we're young. It was nice. I get to see him as who he was as a player the whole entire year. When they go to the combine, they do this overall analysis of who they are, not that day, but kind of just a combined one of who they might be and like what they showed there. And I just knew that, okay, yeah, maybe he needs more shot creation in the league, but he's still a great rim protector. He's still a great like 3-and-D player who is able to convert on like any play, but we'll see what happens. I don't know. I was just really happy for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Chris, I want to know from your lens, like, how did you find out that you were covering the draft? And was it weird because of your perspective and relationship with the Barclays Center?
No, it's more of like our FUV here. It's more of like a small ensemble sort of sports media thing, almost like not to make a Barstool comparison, but like that where it's like we have seven people and then one kind of person controlling everything and they kind of delegate things. And I think that from it was a call saying, "Hey, you and Brendan, we have an opportunity, maybe getting draft credentials. You and Brendan would be the guys that we would want to send. Like, are you and Brendan available?" And then we both said yes because Brendan's another colleague of mine. He's from Dallas, so the kind of Mavs
Hmm.
thing, we thought we were gonna, do something like that. But then as it got closer, I was told that we only got one credential and that I would be the one taking that credential. And I, obviously very appreciative of that. And as soon as I got the call, I think my head immediately went to I'm obviously on in my personal Twitter accounts. I'm on Nets Twitter. Kind of, I'm already kind of losing my mind, and I already kind of have an illness when it comes to like just like being annoying online with my favorite team. But I really kind of went into hyperdrive with it as I got the credential. And yeah, it was a point of pride because it's like we have a Knicks crew. I'm obviously a part of the Nets crew throughout the year, and they can only give the credential to one person. So it was definitely a badge of honor for sure. And I think they knew I'd be comfortable in the setting, and I think the content I got from it, I think kind of showed that for sure.
Two more questions.
Yeah.
I want to start with Matt specifically because of the
Sure.
burden of just like running this an entire website, and you, Melissa, too, because you're a staff editor. You're the crew in chief. Is that the right title for your
Sports editor.
sports editor? So like specifically you guys, because you guys are like the top dogs at your places. I'm not, so I'm not saying anything about that. Um, is was there like a feeling that over those 72 hours, 48 hours, like you guys had your floors raised? So for me, when I came out of the draft, I was like, I feel like my worst is so much better now. Was there ever just like a feeling after all the reporting that was done last week where you felt like, I'm just so much better than I was, or just some level of improvement that is hard to kind of see on a day to day?
I try to do a lot of reflection of myself and my writing in itself too. Getting back to the whole like sports editor thing too, I wouldn't be where I am like without my team, without my assistant editor. Like they helped me, but I was alone for this. I was just like, I need to take care of this for my publication, like for my team, because we have eyes on us. Like I want to just take care of Carter and everything I could do. And also covering Arizona for 2 years, I made really close connections with the AD, like the communications director of the men's basketball team.
Mm.
That's how I got my credential application. I reached out for it. No one asked me to go to the draft. I wanted to. So I just took that chance. And you just have to kind of try and open doors for yourself as much as you can. And going back to like the delusional thing, like saying your affirmations, saying to yourself, I attract people who help me meet my goals. Like I wouldn't be here right now talking to you guys. This is a privilege in itself, if we didn't get to
Or
do that.
anytime someone's talking to me, they're privileged.
Oh
So
my
Yeah, I
God.
agree. About
I'm
basketball, that
joking.
is a
I'm joking.
privilege.
I'm
But
joking.
yeah, it was great. Matt.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that. One of the cooler things about doing this whole experience, the writing, the storytelling, even like, the PR people that the Spurs sent, I'd worked with all of them before. So it was familiar faces here and there. The thing that I gained the most or that I was able to glean from this experience was just the fact that I now know how it works, what it's like for those players to go through that 3 day process, the fact that they have media the day before, then they get drafted, and then they do the social media stuff. Then they call the coach, and then they go speak to us, and then they go speak to the local. Like, I think just knowing how it all works and understanding that process a little bit better, you know, I've always said understanding, knowing how things work in general, it always helps your storytelling. All these little details that you can include those in little anecdotes, or it helps you shape the narrative you want to tell. And so I think for me, it was just being in the building for the first time of a draft, and knowing what that's like for them really helped me. Just to understand it a little bit more, just to kind of know what these rookies, what every player who's been drafted on to years and years and years, what they have experienced at one point in their career. And so I think that's what I enjoyed the most, was just kind of understanding how it works.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, even from an operational point of view, I know we got to get Matt to. I know Stefan Castle and Wembanyama are waiting for Matt, but I think that kind of from that perspective, it's so easy to. I think from both sides, it takes the same effort to be nice and to not be nice in these sort of settings. And I think being friendly and being nice is so important and so underrated when kind of meeting everyone or just kind of being in these settings. I think when you're really productive in what you're doing, like if you're really about what you're doing there and you're not, just hanging out, you show you're being productive along with that friendliness. I think that duo of friendliness and productive I don't really, from my experience, if I'm doing those two things, I've never felt out of place or that I shouldn't be somewhere. It always makes me, it gives me this real sense I deserve to be where I should be. So I think friendliness and productiveness is the two things I try to keep in mind in these kind of events and settings.
Last question
Absolutely.
for the day, because I know Matt's gotta run, and I just want to know, what is one thing you guys feel like that you wish you would have told your younger self that you know now after covering the draft, after having all these experiences? We're all going into our senior years. What is something that you wish you guys would have told yourself when you guys started your media careers that you know now?
Mm, I'd probably say keep going, of course. And then I'm so proud of you, just for everything that like we've done. And that I'd be getting asked a question of what would I be telling my younger self? That's kind of just like that's amazing. And I would just hug her. I'd be like, you could do it, and you deserve to be here as much as anyone else does.
My entire journey to be to this point was kind of a leap of faith in a way because I haven't taken the traditional, Melissa, I would love to be, to say I'm the sports editor for Missouri and I covered the draft because a Tiger was there, but to be honest, our school newspaper sucks. Sports is even worse. And so me being here was a result of me quitting the student newspaper, taking a leap of faith to do a freelancing gig with the city newspaper on high school features. That opened the door for, this on SI network used to be Fan Nation. So I started with college, with Texas A&M, with Missouri, with Ohio State. Then it led to the Spurs, and then it led to this and that. And so I think if I had to say something to, me 3 years ago, 4 years ago, before I started this whole journey, it would be just to take the risks and to, accept whatever consequences come with it. Because so far, it's been worth it. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I would say.
Chris, you got the
Uh,
last word.
Yeah, I would say to be myself. I think that when I've seen the most success in this industry, it's when I'm being myself and I'm not trying to be something else. And also on a broad perspective, I think something that's always helped me is, humble enough to prepare, confident enough to succeed kind of thing, where I'm not overly confident, but I'm not overly humble either. I think that kind of balance is super important. And I think as long as I told myself at a younger age to kind of hold on to that, take every opportunity in front of you with a smile, I think I'd be okay.
Thank you guys all. I really
Thank you, Holden.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Thank
uh,
you.
thank you all for watching another episode of Holden Sherman's Conversations. Please make sure to subscribe, like, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss the latest from Holden Sherman's Conversations.